Hi everyone, this is Lauren coming at you from the break zone with another deck tech video. This one going over the mono fire list that was piloted by Clarmelia over at the Trial of the Zodiac Braves, the second event of the Opus 7 season, and it actually came in top 4 at the 21 player event. So just to let you know, our locals are actually pretty good. I mean, they're pretty formidable opponents, and Clarmelia did quite well, surprising people in the meta with such a deck. But there's definitely some fine-tuning left to be done in this deck. I did talk to her, and she mentioned that there were some changes that she was thinking about making in the long run. But otherwise, for anybody that's kind of looking at the meta right now and thinking that there's a lot of mono wind, some wind water, or some mono water going around, or Fusoya decks and wind earth, this is something to kind of switch it up, have a good time, be aggressive. It's not turbo discard as Jesper and Thaumaturge are banned, but this is a low backup deck and it's a lot of fun to play. So let's go over some of the cards, going over well, the whole deck at this point, a little bit of a different way to take a look at it over here. And we're going to start off with Ledner. And Ledner is quite potent. I mean, definitely a 2 CP forward. And there's a decent amount of them because this deck likes 2 CP forwards. It is running Aegis and it is running Godot. So 2 CP forwards come with a little bit of a bonus on it because of all the synergy from this deck. And Ledner is one of them, forces your opponent to deal with it and to spend resources to be able to do so. Normally, let's say you're going against Wind Earth and they try to do things with Daluma and Cactuar, they're going to have to pay a little bit extra for that because that's just not good enough. Normal removal or combat tricks are not enough to take care of Ledner. Of course, EX Burst can take care of him, but otherwise, it can be a bit of a pain in the butt. And Clarmelia did pick Ledner instead of the 2-drop Tifa for haste because she has other ways to give her forwards haste. But she's still not quite convinced that this card fits in the deck, but I think that is quite good. Alright, next up we've got Soul, part of that Aegis Soul package, so it's so good. If you do turn 1 Aegis and Soul, that's a lot of value, a lot of power going out there, a lot of pressure on your opponent as those two forwards synergize really well with each other. Since Aegis does count as a Warrior of Light, and Soul gets that plus 2000 power boost and haste from it. So if you pay 4 CP, drop Aegis and Soul at the same time, then all of a sudden you have 7000 power haste forward and 8000 power with Brave, because Aegis will also give Soul that little bit of a bonus. And there's 3 copies of Soul because that combo is just so strong. Next up, we've got Warrior of Light, also synergizes with the Phoenix that you're running in this deck that lets you bring back 2 CP forwards and gives a bit of a boost to go over the top of your opponent. And it's not too hard, it's not to get to that count of 4 forwards for Warrior of Light to get that bit of haste to surprise your opponent. Next up, we've got Lunith that gives another way to boost your forwards. I mean, we're talking about a aggressive mono element deck, and Soul counts as that plus 1000 power boost to all your other fire forwards, so that's quite good. But keep in mind that it is very susceptible to removal, so you do expect it to be taken out quite early on. So it is as a 3-off because it's just too often that your opponent is able to deal with it early on because it is one of those high priority targets. Next up, we got Aegis, also a 3-of. Obviously, as I mentioned, Aegis and Soul package is really good. There's also the other Warrior of Light would get that little bit of a bonus from having Brave, but having a Brave 5000 power forward is better on blocks than on really attack because, well, it's not gonna that Warrior of Light, once it enters the field the following turn, will not be all that big unless you want to count the Libra and the Lunith being on the field. Next up, we've got Godot to give a plus 2000 power boost to all your 2 CP forwards. And if you're able to get it to stick around, you'll be able to use that ability to give your other forwards haste, put all that pressure. As I mentioned, this deck does not count on having a lot of backups on the field at any given time. So you want to put that pressure, put the pedal to the metal, and Godot is one way to do it. Unfortunately, it did not work out that well for Clarmelia when she was playing this deck. She does like to be pretty aggressive. If you don't remember watching her on a previous video, she did have the Clarmelia Chronicles where she was learning how to play Mono Lightning as I was playing Mono Ice and trying to teach her a couple of things about how things work out. But her true roots are definitely in mono fire. She's a fire fanatic, and it definitely shows in how aggressive she likes to be. So Godot on curve and likes to push that agenda forward about haste and being very aggressive. Next up, we've got Zell, who is an amazing card, being able to take care of all those pesky monsters that normally fire has a problem to dealing with. And there's definitely other tricks you could play with it, such as using it for an additional way to as a form of removal without running more summons, because you want more forwards to be able to pressure your opponent. So if you attack with a forward that you have more than one copy of, one in your hand, one on the field, and you can't play the one in your hand, you go ahead and attack with it. You don't mind it being blocked, and then follow that up with a Zell on their second main phase to be able to take out that forward. Next up, we've got Zande, who's actually underperforming in this deck, as this deck is more of an early mid-game deck, not so much mid-late game. And Zande was not exactly what she was looking for. There's a chance that it goes down from a 2 count to actually being taken out, but as some other cards were definitely overperforming in comparison. Next up, we've got Jacked, another card that didn't quite fit in this deck. Initially, you start thinking about like, well, if I don't get to finish the game too early on and my opponent actually tries to race me or stabilizes, deals a couple points of damage, you'll be able to play Jacked. But this deck is so aggressive that Jacked was not able to really get anything out of that second ability. The first ability, though, did come into play. Playing a 1 cost 9,000 forward is pretty good, but it doesn't really finish the game for you. So there's a high chance that this card gets taken out of this deck. Next up, Vermilion Bird, Zuyu, which actually came in clutch in this for this deck, as it was able to be a really good finisher. Keep in mind that even if you had 5 backups, which usually this deck does not, but even if you had 3 backups, you'll need about 6 CP to be able to give it haste and play it out on the same turn. But when it comes into play and it actually does its thing, it is a thing of beauty, putting that much pressure on your opponent. Obviously, you still have to watch for EX Burst, which is this deck is very susceptible to, but Zuyu definitely did the trick, and there's a chance that he's going to be a 2 of, and Zende goes down to a 1 of. Next up, got Ranger, who actually synergizes really well with all your other forms of damage, as when he attacks, he does not target but deals 2,000 damage to all opposing forwards. So if you don't mind kind of throwing him out there for the wolves, then you can definitely get some ping damage, follow that up with some other things, such as, I mean, if your opponent has some rather large forwards, you could go ahead and attack with Ranger, follow that up with an attack with, for example, Vermilion Bird, Zuyu, and you'll be able to deal with 11,000 power forwards. And last but not least, for the forwards, we got Onion Knight, who at 5k is definitely, well, the 2-drop haste you could consider Tifa as well, because she is fire. But with Onion Knight, you don't have to rely so much on the 1000 power buff to stay out of that Luma range, which is definitely a pretty big deal. And it didn't come up as too much of an issue having 2 of in this deck. And if your opponent tries to take care of Onion Knight during the prep attack step or before that, then you could go ahead and return it to your hand if you want to. Alright, next up, we're going to go over some of the backups. Starting off with, well, Lulu as a 1 of, another form of removal. She's pretty good, and if you have some backups that are kind of clogging up your hand, shouldn't really be the case, but in case you want to, you could, for example, you have a Vermilion Bird, Katuna, and you really need to get rid of something that's in play, but you need to search out that summon, and you have, for some odd reason, too many cards in your hand. You could go ahead and crack that Vermilion, use Lulu, and after that, actually play out another Vermilion Bird Lassie. Next up, we've got Ninja, who is a bit of a controversial pick, as there's 1 Ninja and 2 Red Mage in this deck, but the Ninja works as a one-time Red Mage. Okay, and here is Red Mage, who serves the same purpose, but normally Clarmelia did not end up her turns with too many cards in hand, so it did cost to use Red Mage, but Red Mage was definitely a huge deal to finish up games when your opponent puts out a forward that's a bit of a hassle to deal with, and Red Mage is able to deal with that. There's a chance that she takes out that one ninja and replaces it with a third Red Mage. Next up, we got Sage to give your forwards haste. As I mentioned, this deck likes to really put the pressure on your opponent, and Sage helps do just that, as well as push your board state forward by putting in one backup so that it could curve out into Libra. Speak of the devil, here's Libra to give all your forwards besides Onion, except for Onion Knight, that plus 1000 power boost, which can be definitely really good, as some of your forwards are about 7,000 even with the boost. So putting them up to 8,000 will be able to force them to allow you to trade with your opponent's larger forwards. And last but not least, Vermilion Bird, let's see Katuna to be able to search out a variety of your other summons, as well as make them deal more damage, which can be quite relevant. So in case you're facing down like some problematic forwards, then all of a sudden your Mohammed is able to take out 9,000 power forwards and move them from the game. As well, if you end up hitting EX burst for, let's say, Ifrit, you'll be able to deal 8,000 damage. Okay, next up we'll go over some of the summons, starting off with Malaya to get that haste, that first strike, and to draw that card. And that plus 1000 power boost. It is a big deal. It's a great card, and it helps this deck just keep the pedal to the metal, keep the aggression coming, because sometimes when you're trying to go ahead and force your opponent into a bit of a combat trick, a bit of a trade, and as I mentioned, some of your forwards are on the smaller end, Malaya will make them just that little bit bigger, and with that first strike they'll survive as well, and you won't be missing out or losing out too much in terms of how many cards you have in hand, because you'll be able to draw the card right back up. So throwing out a card that you don't need so much and being able to replace your Malaya with something else, as well as take out an opposing forwards, I'll definitely take that any day of the week. Next up, we've got Mohammed, who is an amazing card to deal with all those decks that like to do recursion, or when a problematic forward is out there. 8,000 damage is that sweet spot that people like to actually aim for. So this deck has a lot of summons that's able to deal with Opus 6 Zidane, as it can be a bit of a problem since you have 24 forwards and you really want to keep the pressure. If your opponent is able to rip cards out of your hand, especially forwards, is going to be a problem. And with the plethora of summons that you have, including Ifrit, for example, you'll definitely be able to deal with them. And if you hit EX burst with Ifrit, or even if you don't, but you have a Vermilion Bird Katuna out, then you'll be able to deal that 8,000 damage, which, as I mentioned, is that sweet spot that you're aiming for. Next up, we've got Phoenix to be able to recur all the variety of 2 CP backup 2 CP forwards that you have, and a lot of them have haste, so that's really good. And if you want to just give a power boost to all your forwards and you don't have it in play yet, then go ahead and get that Warrior of Light out, so that with the Phoenix to deal 2,000 damage to your opposing board, as well as to give a 2,000 power boost to your forwards until the end of the turn, and hopefully go for the win. And if you have enough forwards out, then that Warrior of Light will actually have haste as well. Last but not least, for the summon, we've got Brynhildr, who, well, is, as I mentioned, that little sweet spot where you want to take out that, well, maybe not the sweet spot, but to be able to deal with that Opus 6 Zidane, which can be a big problem, and 7,000 damage will be just enough. And last but not least, we'll go over some of the monsters, such as Goblin, who is a card advantage to some extent. I mean, it's not too hard to have one backup out, which normally the Clarmelia was able to finish her games with somewhere between 1 to 3 backups out. So Goblin is easy to play off of backups, so you're not falling behind, you're getting full efficiency out of it. And to give haste and draw a card is a pretty big deal, especially if you're able to give haste to, let's say, a Godot that you just played this turn and play another forward, draw a card, and after that play another forward, give it haste as well. That can definitely put a lot of pressure on your opponent. And last but not least, we've got Verona. So Clarmelia's playstyle did not really land well to having this card, to giving this card a lot of value, but when it did work, it worked really well. A 2-drop 8k is a lot, especially when it has Brave, and you can actually give it power boost from Lunith and Libra, as well as a temporary power boost from Warrior of Light, for example. it can be a pretty big deal. Unfortunately, Clarmelia was very aggressive with her cards and did not get to play Verona very often, but there's a chance that it goes up depending on how she decides to take this deck from this point on. So hopefully you have a good time. I wanted to put out a video for Christmas. Merry Christmas, everyone. And in the spirit of the season, well, it's a red deck when green decks are very popular, so green and red are very popular colors for Christmas, obviously. So hopefully you had a good time. If you feel like switching it up, you know, being a little more aggressive instead of playing your mid to late game with, as I mentioned, mono wind, mono water, wind water, as well as earth wind, then this is definitely a deck that's pretty cool to check out. Some other people mentioned that Fire Ice is another deck to watch out for, but this actually has a lot of the cards that would actually transfer over to the other decks as well, so it's something that you should get familiar with to expect when somebody's playing maybe Fire, or perhaps on the first turn they have Aegis and Soul or other cards as well. It's something that I expect to see here and there come up, as some players like to be a little more aggressive, a little less controlling, and to have just a good time, and especially expect to have at your weekly. So congratulations, Clarmelia, for getting to the quarterfinals, well actually no, semifinals over at the 21 player event. She did really well. I'm glad that she's actually made so much progress since her early days over in what was it, Opus 4 when she started out. She's definitely put a lot of time and effort and got all the way there. So hopefully you like what we do, you like this video. If you do, go ahead and give us a thumbs up, subscribe, go ahead and put any comments, questions, or suggestions down below. And I'd also like to give a shout out to our sponsor, MagicTechGames.com, that sells Final Fantasy trading card game singles, as well as Magic and Pokemon. So if you go ahead and check them out, they have all those things available to you. And they did provide some things that we're able to give out when we reach 800, 900, or 1,000 subscribers. At that point, we'll pick one of our subscribers at random, and we'll go ahead and let them choose, and we'll send them one of the following things, whether it's Mox Amber from Dominaria, Horizon Canopy from Iconic Masters, Cactuar Sleeves, a 60 pack, this wonderful Lightning plushie, or an Opus 3 Shiva deck box from the Toronto Crystal Cup that was autographed by Taro Kageyama, the producer of the game. And we're even going to throw in our beautiful pins from, well, from us actually, from our team. Here you go. Wait, let me see. Can I go up? I'm really bad at trying to measure out the distance and everything from... Well, they're really quite nice. I'm wearing one right now. They're beautiful. They're available on our sponsor's website, so if you want to buy them, go ahead and do so. Support us that way. We're having a great time over here. I know it's a holiday, so Merry Christmas to everyone. Hopefully we'll be able to make a video before the new year, but I can't guarantee that. Otherwise, I would like to wish every one of you, well, happy holidays, as well as a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And hopefully, well, we've come around to, I think it's been a little bit over a year since we started our channel, and we've gotten so much support from every one of you. So thank you so much for being there. We wouldn't be here without you. We look forward to the 2019 season, as we will be covering some of the events, maybe not all of them, but definitely some, as we've been told. Well, I can't divulge all the details, but we'll be there. There'll be commentary, there'll be streams in the upcoming season, so look forward to that. Otherwise, thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.